guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Neighbor Trespassed and Was Bitten. Crap has gone off the rails. Pitchforks, fences, lawyers. Oh my. My next door neighbor of 12 years has a lawn care business and has done my yard the entire time I've lived here. He has always checked with me before going in the backyard, expect this time. We were out of town a couple weeks ago. The neighbor, let's call him Joe, and his friend, how about calling him Ray, were doing the mowing, edging, and weed eating of the yards on their route. Joe came to our door and rang the bell. No one answered and the dog, Poochie, barked for at least 90 seconds solid. Joe and Ray decided to enter the backyard fence anyway. Poochie went out the pet door and bit Ray on the leg. Ray chased the dog with the weed eater and yelled. Ray left and returned with a pitchfork. He stood at the back door screaming for the dog to come back outside so Ray could bury him and that it was time to die, mother ducker. Did I mention I have all this on surveillance video? Anyway, I get a phone call from the neighbor's wife informing me Ray was bitten and going to the hospital. When we returned home 2 days later, Ray and Joe came over and demanded I pay the medical bills. Apparently, there was a puncture wound that required a band-aid. I declined and asked why they came inside the fence without permission when Joe had always received explicit consent before going out back. Joe said he assumed someone was home even though there were no cars in the driveway, and no one answered the door. Clearly, this guy uses an entirely different logic algorithm than I do. Joe and Ray stomped off back to their home next door. Half an hour later, Joe sent me text messages informing me he was taking down our shared fence that is technically on his property. Huh? Because he couldn't shake me down for medical bills, he is removing the fence to punish me? This guy is an irrational, unreasonable bully. The fence was removed on Saturday and I'm currently getting estimates for a replacement. And I received a letter from one of the local ambulance-chasing law firms asking for my homeowner's insurance info. F off. You will get that info only when I'm legally compelled to disclose it during discovery. Crazy. This is the inspiration for a new fence. No wah is awesome. The next story is entitled Neighbor Threatened Dogs and I Break. Years ago, my mother and I had just moved to a new dog-friendly apartment complex. We had 2 dogs, one was a Bichon Shih Tzu and the other is a Terrier Poodle mix. Because of them, we were excited for the community dog park right next to our building. Also, to note, our building was filled with dog owners, each with dogs ranging from small to huge. Our apartment was on the first floor in the back of the building, all the way in the corner. It was a nice private area for us with how the apartments were situated. Since one of our dogs is a terrier, he can be a bit barky when we are not home. Though when we are home, we have a clicker to get his attention, which he has been trained to stop barking and come to whoever has the clicker. Due to our work hours, I was usually home in the morning and Mom was home in the afternoon, leaving him alone for a few hours during the day. After a month of moving to our new apartment, we received a note on our door. It was from one of our neighbors. It stated, "Dear neighbor, I understand that you are new to this complex, but it is rude to allow your dog to bark. It is ruining my sleep before I go to work, and my job is extremely important. I don't care how you do it, but shut your dog up." My mom turned in the note right away to the leasing office as she wasn't sure what to do with it. That is when the office told us not to worry because he had done this to every dog owner in the building. They did ask us to see if we can find ways to calm him down when we were not home. So, we did. We found out the kids of the neighborhood liked playing with the power station outside our apartment and that is who he had been barking at. So, we closed off that area for him when we went out and no one was home. We started playing calming music as a way to help as well. Another week goes by and this time we hear a knock at the door. We go outside, and we meet our angry neighbor. He explains that our dog has kept him up every day and woke him up with his hours of barking. Both of us had been home that day, and our dog had been a good boy and had not had excessive barking. I still remember what he had told us when I explained that. I know what I heard. If you can't control your dog, then I am going to call animal control and have them both taken from you. I did it before and have no problem getting rid of your dogs too. Then I'll get you kicked out for not following your lease, and I can do that because I am very rich, and the apartment needs my money. So do something to shut your dogs up or else." After that and my mom apologizing for what had happened, we went back in. A few moments later, I walked out to get the mail and discovered from another neighbor that he had gone to 3 other apartments and made similar threats. After some convincing, my mom told the apartment what had happened. We were told not to worry, and if he did that again to please contact them. We also found out that the apartment had offered him an apartment away from the dogs, but he had declined since the dogs were the problem and not him. However, what he had done, my mom began to show signs of anxiety and bought a lemon spray bark collar for our dog. While I didn't like this idea, it had put her at ease to go outside our apartment. We did make sure to only put it on him when we both were not home. A month went by peacefully, then once again we get a knock on our door. This time it was animal control. They had gotten an anonymous report of a dog being abused and neglected in our home. They explained that someone has said that our dogs were barking because of neglect. My mom invited the AC lady inside and explained the situation. We showed her everything we could to prevent our dogs from being taken away. The nice lady noticed how playful and happy our dogs were and figured it was another false call. She explained that they had gotten a few of those from an anonymous concerned neighbor for other apartments in this building. The AC lady left, telling us that if they are threatening again to try and get it on record. This event had turned my mom into a paranoid person who became afraid to leave the house, thinking that if she did, then she would lose her pups. Normally I am the calmest person in my family, never really letting anyone get to me, but this neighbor had done this to hurt us. So, I did my research and discovered a few things that could legally help us. With new information on certain laws and leasing terms, I formed a plan. During a weekend that my mom was visiting my aunt in a different state, I began my plan. I started it by printing out a few things and then sat outside with my phone and a speaker. I began to play a video of a dog barking really loud. I had figured out which apartment was his thanks to a few neighbors who also were tired of being harassed. I sat there looking across the courtyard to where his apartment was. I waited with a huge smile on my face, and as I hoped for, he stormed out and headed over to where I was. I turned off my video and turned on my recorder without him noticing. His face is red with anger as he looks at me sitting there with a smile. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" I ask him. "I told you what I will do to your family if you didn't stop your dumbass mutt from ruining my sleep. Now, I'm going to get them taken from you and get you kicked out for not doing as I said. I gave you a chance. I hope when they take your dogs that they are killed, and you and your mom live inside a cardboard box." I give him a fake oh dear look and say, "So you are saying that I am not allowed to make loud noises including my dogs barking between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m.? And that I went against the law by doing so? You know you did. And you are telling me this from my porch? At 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This won't be your porch once I tell the leasing office." "Oh no. That is a very serious threat for my dogs and my family, isn't it?" "Yes it is." I give him a huge smile and turn off my recorder from my phone. The neighbor is confused now, and I ask him to have a seat. I have a few things to show him. I pull out my papers and hand him the first one. It was the county's noise ordinance laws. In our county, a dog's bark was considered the same amount of sound as a loud appliance, so they can bark between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Before he could talk, I pull out another paper. This one states that it is against the leasing terms to threaten another neighbor, and after one warning that the apartment complex had the right to revoke their lease. He looks at me with an understanding of what he had done now. I silence him and pull out one last paper. This one was another leasing term I had found. This face after reading this one had made him turn white. This last one talked about how it was a complete violation of leasing terms to go onto another renter's property and threaten them or their property. This includes the renter's outdoor area. Those found guilty of this violation will have their lease revoked immediately and be forced to leave the apartment within a set time. The scared look on his face was priceless as I silently got up and walked back into my apartment. After he finally left, I called my leasing office and explained what had just happened and agreed to email the recording to them right away. A week later my mom came home with some news that she had learned from the leasing office. The man had been evicted from his apartment and would be leaving later that week. I found out that my actions had caused the other dog owners of the building to come forward and admit what he had been doing to all of them. After that there was never another complaint, and I threw away the lemon spray collar. My mom still gets anxiety attacks once in a while but has been getting help to ease those worries. As for me, I don't regret what I did, I just feel bad that it had to come to this. The next story is titled, My Grandpa Destroys a Wall and Crazy Neighbor Pays for It. Okay, so not my revenge, so I don't know if I am allowed to post, but this is really funny story constantly being retold to family members. Before I was born my grandpa had just retired and decided duck it, I am going to live in the middle of a mountain that is in the middle of nowhere. He bought a piece of land far away from any city or village and started building a house. His only neighbors were an old lady and a crazy idiot. After half a year he decided to permanently move in there and started building more and more things to accommodate himself. One of the things he built were a wall around his property and an outdoor toilet. This will be important later on. During this time his crazy neighbor was trying to sell property. My grandpa offered to buy it from him, but the guy declined, asking for 10 times more than my grandfather offered. They got into a sort of an argument and ended all communication. Now the crazy bastard was out to get my grandpa. He would call communal services and make police officers and inspectors come on a 2-hour ride for every possible thing he could. We are talking about stuff like leaving a dog without the leash in a walled-off backyard or having leftover building materials on road, which my grandpa also built. Before that they had fricking dirt road. Now my grandpa did not mind. But every time police were involved, they had to go over the backyard belonging to the old lady since works were going on, and crazy neighbor sealed of a gate connecting his and my grandpa's property with garbage. It did not look nice or smell nice, but my grandpa was busy with other stuff to keep removing it every night, only for the bastard to rebuild it next morning. Even though my grandpa did not give a shit, the lady did, and she was on my grandpa's side. So, one day when the officers came, she asked a couple of questions to these lovely people. She then contacts my grandpa. She learned 2 things. First of all, since the wall was built on my grandfather's land, he had all the rights to it, he could destroy it completely if he wanted. Second, filling a gate in the wall with shit was illegal. But my grandfather did not have right to build a gate into someone else's yard without explicit permission either, or pursuing it in court would only end up with having to seal it off. She informs my grandpa about all of this and soon they hatch a plan. They wait for 2 to 3 months for heavy autumn rains to start drowning the land. Then old lady files a formal complaint about the smell of the garbage. My grandpa pleads guilty and signs off a document that legally forces him to destroy the gate and remove the garbage from it. Now the very same day my grandpa signs off on the documents, the biggest storm of year starts. It rained for 7 days before inspectors could come to remove the garbage and the gate. Now my grandfather had previously cemented 3 of the 4 drains that were built in the wall. This plus the mountain being steep resulted in wall acting like a dam for all the water that was coming in. Almost entire yard was filled with water, eventually even lifting everything up from the outdoor toilet my grandfather built. His neighbor tried everything he could to stop the inspectors from destroying that garbage-filled gate. He pleaded and pleaded, but he could do nothing. He did not own the wall, and he was the one making all the communal calls, and the inspectors grew to hate him. Furthermore, my grandfather had pleaded guilty, meaning that any form of complaint on the decision of the court from a third party was impossible and deemed invalid at this point. After the inspectors removed the gate, a small sea of shit, construction materials and water poured into the yard of the asshole and ended up watching the water destroy his entire yard. All while my grandpa and nice old lady were drinking tea from her balcony. Today while telling me the story, he told me, I felt like God unleashing the flood upon the sinful world back then. Which made me chuckle because I know he is an atheist like me. Aftermath was even better. Needless to say, the guy needed to pay thousands to repair all the water damage and cleaning he had to do. All the while my grandfather's and old lady's house were completely untouched by any of it since they were on a lot higher ground. The best part is that since he admitted he was the one filling the gate with garbage to the inspectors, they made a note of that, and some time later he received a written order from the court that he had to repay my grandpa for any property damage because of that. He ended up going to court, losing, after the old lady testified in my grandfather's favor, and having to rebuild the gate that was destroyed along with all the court fees. The guy moved out as soon as he could, and from what the new owner said, he sold it for less than half of what my grandfather offered him. The last story is titled, You Steal My Identity? I Steal Your Cars. I just recently found some of the revenge subs around here and spent a chunk of my weekend reading the amazing posts on r/nuclear revenge. Last night, my husband and I were visiting with our neighbor on our patio, and I told them about one of the posts. Our neighbor then shared one of his, non-nuclear, revenge stories and gave me permission to retell it here. Names have been changed to protect the guilty. Our 40-something neighbor Frank Smith has a brother 3 years older named Fred, with the two similar in looks and build. Apparently, these boys were not obedient children and got into trouble a lot. Frank, mostly, straightened up by the time he reached 21, but Fred kept at it, with drinking, drugs, multiple duos, etc. While the two were still living at home with their parents in their early 20s, Frank happened to leave his wallet on the kitchen counter one night after coming home from a night out. The next morning, he discovered his ID wasn't in his wallet. Thinking he must have left it at a bar the night before, he tried locating it but with no luck. Not thinking much about it, he just got a new ID. Fast forward a year or so and Frank gets a phone call. It's his uncle whose son works at the county jail. Fred had been arrested and their cousin happened to see him when he was getting booked, under the name Frank Smith. Turns out Fred had given the police Frank's name and ID and was going to jail under Frank's identity. Needless to say, Frank was pissed. He went down to the jail to prove he was Frank, and Fred was a liar. Fred was ultimately sentenced to serve time and stayed put. During the time that Fred was in jail, Frank received a letter in the mail from the state BMV. It said that his two vehicles, an Audi sedan and a VW Bug, were due for e-checks, emission checks. Frank was confused because he only owned a truck. He went to the BMV and discovered that these two vehicles were indeed titled in his name. That's when Frank realized that his brother, who had lost the right to own a vehicle due to excessive duos, used his identity to register these cars. The revenge. Frank asked how much it cost to get duplicates of the titles, $8 each. So, he paid $16 and walked away with title documents for the two cars. He knew enough of his brother's friends to start calling around in search of the cars. Lo and behold, he located them both, at different locations. Frank is a knowledgeable mechanic and could start these cars without keys, but he knocked on the door of each house where the cars were. He explained to each person that he owned the title to the car, showing them the document, and gave them the opportunity to remove their belongings from the vehicle before he took it. They understood and didn't push back, taking their things out of the car and handing him the keys. Frank proceeded to sell both cars and pocket around $3,000 for all his troubles. The good news is that after his stint in jail, Fred got sober and became someone Frank could actually be friends with. Thanks for listening.